Good evening, and welcome to this evening's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments, where tonight we're going to take a look at the TI-84 tips and tricks for working with graphs. We're really excited to have you with us tonight, and we notice that some of you are joining us for the first time. So if this is your first time, we'd like to offer a special welcome if this is your first T-Cubed Professional Development webinar. We'd also like to thank everyone for completing the live survey on the right side of your screen. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI technology to make tough to teach, tough to learn concepts accessible to all my students. I'm really excited to introduce our two panelists tonight, Karen Camp and Ruth Casey. Karen was instructor of mathematics education at Yale University for 15 years and previously taught high school and middle school mathematics for 13 years. She's been a T-Cube national instructor since 1998 and has been an author of materials for summer workshops and TI instructional websites. Karen speaks often on how to use technology effectively to enhance student understanding. Thanks for being with us, Karen.
Glad to be here, Mike.
And Ruth lives in Kentucky, where she taught mathematics in grades 8 through 12 for 29 years. A T-Cube national instructor, textbook author, and former member of the NCTM Board of Directors. Ruth specializes in grades 7 through 12 mathematics, instructional technology, and professional development for mathematics teachers. During the 2015-16 school year, Ruth will provide training and classroom support as she continues her work with teachers in TI Math Forward and Gear Up programs. Thanks for being with us, Ruth.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here.
We're expecting a large crowd, so your audio is muted. Feel free to send questions to Karen or Ruth using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We'll also be using the chat window to send general messages. This session is being recorded. As a reminder, we'll provide a link to the event certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. If you'd like to try and follow along tonight with your handheld or your software, that's fine. But don't forget, it might be better to do that with the recording that you'll automatically get within a couple days. That way you can stop and pause and rewind the recording as necessary. We don't expect you'll have any audio issues tonight, but in the event that you do, try selecting Communicate in the WebEx menu, choose Audio Broadcast, and then click Join. At this point, Karen is going to discuss our agenda.
Thanks, Mike. Tonight's agenda is to help you get the most out of your TI-84 technology, no matter which part of the TI-84 family you and your students are using. We're going to show you some of the classroom software for the TI-84 family, TI-Connect CE and TI-SmartView CE. We're going to go through a whole bunch of tips and tricks for graphing and analyzing functions. We will look at some special features in the Stat Calc menu, the manual fit, and the quick plot and fit equation features. And we'll take a look at two different TI-84 apps to explore functions and inequalities. If we have time, we'll show you how to reach some online resources from the TI website. And no matter what, stick around at the end of the webinar, because one lucky winner will get 2 free registrations to the 2016 T-Cubed International Conference in Orlando, Florida, coming up this month.
Thanks so much, Karen. And Ruth is going to discuss our expected outcomes.
As Karen mentioned, we're going to be looking at some of the classroom software that can be used, specifically TI-SmartView CE emulator software. We're also going to take a quick look at TI-Connect software. We're going to be really focusing on tips and tricks for getting the most out of our calculators in the graphing environment. Then we're going to look at how we can use some data along with our graphing, and we'll explore some functions and inequalities with some applications on our handhelds.
Thanks so much, Ruth. It's all yours.
Okay, we are also going to try to mention throughout the webinar tonight opportunities to really illustrate multiple representations in the classroom, not only with the teacher software, but also on the handheld as well. Just having a look at that, we won't be able to cover all of those bulleted items tonight, but we sure will be able to talk about a couple of them as we go along. I'm going to start out by sharing my desktop here, and I have launched the software TI-Connect CE. We'll show you in a bit, if you haven't already seen in the previous slides, where it's available on the education site from TI. It is free software. It is a utility software so that our calculators and our computers can work with each other. So I'm looking at TI-Connect CE. It's under connected calculators. There's nothing displaying. So I have just plugged in a TI-84 Plus CE. I'm just plugging it into a USB port of my Mac. I'm going to be working in the Mac environment, and a bit later Karen's going to be using same softwares in the PC environment so that we can see that they have all of the same features, and they look pretty much the same. So if that were a regular 84 Plus, it would say that instead of CE. Right now I'm limited only by how many USB ports I have. All right, I can click right here and get a screen capture for it. So if I have students with different things showing up on their calculator during class, functions, and I want to take a snapshot of them, just plug their calculator into a USB port, and I can get a snapshot from their calculator. And let me get another snapshot. All right, so on my handheld that is connected, it's a TI-84 Plus CE. That's just I press the Apps button. I am going to be using the SmartPad app as we go along, so I wanted you to see that that's on my handheld. In the documents that go along with tonight's webinar, one of the things came from me. It was a PDF. This isn't a follow along. It doesn't have point and click keystroke information. It's more of a summary of some of the things I'm going to be using and talking about. All right, and along with that PDF, in the documents from tonight, there were some GDB files, some graph database files. So if I wanted to get them to my handheld, I would use TI-Connect software, which is what I have launched right here. I would get on the Calculator Explorer workspace. This is showing me the contents of my handheld that's plugged in. If I had another one plugged in, I would just click on it and I would see the contents of it. So if I have files that I want to put on the handheld, I just plug them in, launch the TI-Connect software, click on the handheld, and click and drag it over here. If I want Graph Database 1 on the handheld, it's going to give me an opportunity to rename it. I can send it to all of the handhelds if I had more than one connected here. So if I had a 7-port USB hub, I could plug in quite a few at once. All right, and then I would just click and send. If there's already something on there with that name, it will replace it. I had an option to rename it. So that's TI-Connect software. It's free software so that our calculators and our computers can communicate with each other. And we can save student work like screenshots. You can plug a calculator in and get information from that. If you have students that write programs and bring in lists of data, you just get it from their handheld and drag it over to your desktop. So it's a real nice, friendly drop and drag environment. I'm going to close the TI-Connect software. I don't want to save my screenshots. I'm going to launch, actually I have already launched, my TI SmartView software. TI SmartView CE, which is for the 84 Plus family. This is the emulator software for your classroom instruction. I'm going to click so I can see a big screen. I have the keypad on the left, big screen on the right. All right, I can change the calculator model so that we can see that this works with the 84 Plus 84 Plus C, and the CE. So all three of those models can be displayed in your classroom using the same software. It can change how it looks. Sometimes that's a better display. Sometimes it's sharper and crisper. I know that when I'm looking at a computer screen, it's nice not to have a lot of stuff, a lot of white shining on it, and in the classroom as well. But basically, you know your classroom, you know what you can display and how it works best for your students, and they'll let you know if they can see it. All right. So I want to start off with graphing some functions. Now, I have something displayed up there. Many times your students are sharing calculators from another class. You have a class set, they share them. You don't know what's been going on in another classroom. So this particular one, I'll click on Y equals so we can see it's actually in polar mode. It's got a screen showing up. It's got something in the background. Okay, on the 84 Plus, I wouldn't be able to have that image in the background, but I could still be doing the same graphing. That isn't what I want to get ready to teach with my students, so we're going to actually reset the defaults. Now, what their defaults will do, when I go into the mode, the defaults will put everything back over to the left, the default settings, not only in the mode, but also in the format. And in Y equals, it won't clear them out, but it'll turn them off. All right, if there were anything in function mode. So instead of going through all of those, click, 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 I'm going to go second plus for memory. I'm going to choose number 7, and I'm going to choose all defaults, and I want to reset the defaults. Boom, there it is, it reset the defaults. When I press the mode button, things have been set to the left. When I press Y equals, if there was something already there, it didn't erase it, but it did make that equation inactive. All right, and window, it actually did change the viewing window back to this one, what's called the standard viewing window. And let's see, did it do something in format? Yes. It turned the background off. In second zoom for format on my C and my C, that's where I can use a background. Karen's going to be talking about that some more. All right, so let's just get ready to do some graphing. I'm in Y equals. I have x squared plus 2x minus 2. A quick and easy way to get a window is to use one of the preset windows in the Zoom menu. Zoom 6 is the one that it's currently in. It goes -10 to 10 on the X's, -10 on the Y's. My calculator screen isn't a square, so the images could be sort of squished looking. Another nice window is Zoom 4. I'll go ahead and put that in. Oh, nothing graphed. Do we know why nothing graphed? Did somebody send it out in the chat already? Nothing graphed because when we reset the defaults, if there were any active equations, they were turned off or made inactive. So I just get on the equal sign, press enter. All right, now let's see what that looks like. All right, a nice quick graph of that. If you want to turn on a grid in the back, that would be in format. I'll put a grid line in there. Let's see what that looks like. Makes it easy to see. All righty. So that showed up. I did Zoom 4. Let's see what Zoom 4 does. One thing I noticed is if this were indeed 1 along the x-axis, it covers the same space as 1 on the y-axis. So if things are supposed to look perpendicular, they will. If I'm graphing part of a circle, 2 halves of a circle, they'll really look like circles. So let's see what it picked. Those numbers are magic numbers, and they are they're determined by the pixels of your calculator screen, how many across and how many down. So columns and rows of pixels. All right. A nice thing about it is the origin is at the center of the screen, and it goes as I said, covers a distance of 1 on the x-axis and the same as it does on the y. Another thing you notice about that in the Zoom 4 option, delta x, as I move from left to right along the screen, it's graphing every 500ths, and if I were to trace, which I'll do just in a minute, it's twice that. All right, whatever the delta x is, the trace step is going to be twice that. So there I have this. I press trace. I move to the right. Okay, I am using an attached handheld to drive this, and one of the reasons is because I just have better control over it. If I'm displaying my software on an interactive whiteboard, sometimes I get a little click happy and the cursor doesn't keep up with what I'm doing. All right, so if I have the SmartPad app on my handheld attached to my computer with a USB cable, then my SmartPad app is operating the buttons. Okay, Karen's going to talk about that some more.
Yes. One of the documents that's available for participants is how to use the SmartPad app to make your TI-84CE a remote keypad for the emulator.
Right. So Karen's going to be using it as well, talking some more about it. Okay, so that's enough with that basic graph that we were doing. SmartPad is an app on my handheld that lets me use it as a remote. So it's connected and it's controlling this. So I'm actually going to change this. Let's see. A shortcut to get to the end of it, we're talking about tips and tricks, is second and then right arrow. It shoots me to the end of it. I'm just going to make that be 20. And if I do good old Zoom 4, all right, I can see part of the graph. All right, I can see my x-intercepts. I'm not seeing some other things going on. All right, so let's go back. What if I make that be plus 20? Aha, at this point the student says, Ms. Casey, my calculator's not working, and they're showing me an empty graph. And so let's think about it. What are you graphing? Let's have a look. What are you graphing? So a tip, a shortcut that sometimes comes in handy in your software or on the student calculators, at this point you can press trace and it will give you some information about the function that you're graphing. I've pressed trace. At the top of it, it's displaying the equation, the function I'm graphing, and at the bottom it says when x is 0, y is 20. So when x is 0, y is 20, the reason it comes in at x equals 0 is because 0 is the middle value in my window settings. So from left to right along my x-axis, when I press trace, it comes in the middle value. Okay, tips and tricks. If you press enter right now, it will jump to that point. What did we do? We were at Zoom 4. We pressed graph. We didn't see a graph. Press trace and press enter, and it will jump to that point that it's tracing on. All right, for some people, they didn't know that that would happen. And for some of us, we found it out accidentally. We pressed enter accidentally. All right. When you're in trace mode, you can also just enter a value, -1, and enter, and it'll jump to there. So it doesn't have to be just tracing along one by moving on the cursor. By moving the cursor with the arrows, I can press, as long as I have pressed the trace key, it will jump to that. All right, so now I'm going to put in a value. I'm going to put in 5. Did that work? Yes, but it's off the screen. I can press enter, and it will jump to that point. What happens if I put in 20? If I put in x equals 20, I get an error. And the reason I get an error is because the value 20 isn't in the x value that it's tried to calculate in graph. All right, so let me go back to my graph, trace. I can't put in 20. I can put in anything that's one of the x values here. All right, so we've looked at, quick review of what we looked at. We looked at how to make a graph, an equation active or inactive. I press graph right now, nothing will graph. Sometimes I already have it in there, and then just make it active, turn it on so we can start working on it. We've turned it on, we've pressed trace. We did a zoom form window to start out with, not a great window for that function. All right. Sometimes I like for students to think, well, actually all the time, I like to think about, okay, the graphical representation isn't working for me here. I could trace, I could wiggle around, I could make it work. But let's think about the numerical part of this. Back on my home screen, I could do y1 of 30. I could have it calculate what is function value for the function that's in y1 with our latest software on your 84 Plus and on the C and the CE. When you use alpha trace, you get the shortcuts that pop up for the y equals variables. They're still in the vars, y vars, but alpha trace gives me the pop-up from that. So I can use that on my home screen and function notation, what is f of negative 5.837. So if we have some values that jump around, aren't on our screen, aren't in our window, or maybe some less friendly values, we can certainly use the home screen to compute those for us. Alpha trace, y1 of, just the same function notation. If I want a fraction, I can do alpha y equals, numerator and denominator, 3/7. Sometimes that's a less friendly value for students to compute. All right, and it certainly would be an unfriendly value to try to get from a graph. So thinking about multiple representations, here we have the algebraic. Here we're looking at finding some numeric information. We had a look at a graph. All right, and now in my SmartView software, I'm going to use the thing that's called View Cubed. Okay, I'm in the SmartView CE software. View Cubed lets me show different representations. So I've clicked on View Cubed. I'm going to refresh those screens over here. So I can determine what I want to show here. I want to show the equation. I want to show a graph. That's not a great graph. Remember, we have to play around with our window. And it's showing a table. All right, on the handheld, I can show a table by going Second, Table, and have it displayed. If I want to think about end behavior of a function, I might change the input on, the independent variable to ask. And then when I go to a table, I don't have consecutive values. I can say, what's f of 0? And as f gets large, what's happening? As x gets large, what's happening to y? So that's by controlling the table settings, okay? And that was in second window for table. To look at a table, we go second graph. Now, I do have the advantage in the software of having my multiple representations there. On the handheld, you might want to change your mode so that you have, so that you're able to, oh, I know it paused there, so that you're able to display them. It's possible on the handheld. It's a little bit smaller, but it is in the handheld environment. So in mode, graph table. On the left is a graph, and on the right is a table. Okay, and that table, again, is controlled by your table settings that were in second window. All right, so that's some tips and tricks about using trace to jump to points on a graph, using inputting a value. All right, so I wanted to remind you, Mike said earlier, remember, this is recorded, okay? So what we're doing tonight is we're going to be covering a lot of ground in terms of tips and tricks. Some of them have to do with the software that you use for your instruction. some of them have to do with handheld, and of course some of them overlap. So on the PDF in the materials that you get, again, it's not a point and click step by step, but these are some of the things that we've looked at. We've done some graphing of functions. We used trace. We used a function table. We evaluated functions on the home screen. And remember, when you have an opportunity to go back and look at this again, you can pause it and you say, oh, where did she get that Y1? And you can find it again. Then in the SmartView software, I've been using the calculator emulator workspace. That's what this is called. I used View Cubed. That's what we have over here. Okay, I can see 3 different representations, and I can control what those are by using pull-down menus over here. All right. And this is the Explorer workspace, and it's, again, I can have a look at what do I have in the contents of my calculator, much like we saw with the handheld when we were working with TI Connect on a handheld. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the emulator workspace. I'm going to get rid of View Cubed. And now I want to move to what I have here on this second screen. It says GDB1. Now, the reason it says GDB1 is Graph Database. It's a way of putting some things together in a file to open up on my calculator. This is not something that I would do, boom, all at once in the classroom. In a short amount of time, I'd like for us to get a lot of graphing done quickly and have a look at different things that we can do. So I've launched a graph database. I will launch a graph database. All right, so to activate my graph database, I'm going to go Second, Program, and that will access the Draw menu. Second, Program, to access the Draw menu. And I'm actually going to go to STO. I have stored some already. And I want to recall a graphical database. And I'm going to recall Graph Database 1. Graph Database 1 will have a whole bunch of function graphing going on and some other kinds of graphing as well. Graph Database 1. Done. I have to explore. Let's see. Ooh-wee. It put those in there, and that's what a graphical database does. It stores information about what you have in your Y equals button, whether you're in function mode or one of the other graphing modes. It stores the information used to generate your graph from Y equals and in window. Okay? So let's just look. When I stored the graphical database, I had them turned off. I can turn them on one at a time. I'll just go ahead and do these two. So I'm looking at linear factors, x plus 1, x plus 4. What's that going to look like? Is that a nice window for it? Yes. Oh, I don't need my table anymore for this particular exploration, but it sure is nice to have those. So I'm going to go back to a full screen graph. That's in mode. Look at my graph. I have those. Okay. So I have 2 linear factors. What happens if you multiply linear factors? Yes, I could write out in Y3 x plus 1, the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x plus 4. But tips and tricks, we wanted to show you that you could use your Y variables there. It makes it a little bit easier to generalize. If I wanted to change one of the linear factors, I would just change it back in the Y1 or the Y2. So I'm going to make this active. Before I press graph, what's going to happen? I previously had 2 lines. What's the product of those algebraically? Can you put it on paper? Can you picture what the graph is going to look like? I'm going to press graph. Oh, I wasn't quick enough. All right, so what I mean when I say I wasn't quick enough, I'm going to, as if I have to do some graphing again, I'm going to press graph, and my thumb is hovering over the enter key, graph. Oop. When I press enter in the middle of a graph, it pauses it. Over by the battery icon, you can see a flashy, busy circle. that means it's paused. So we can talk about it. Here's the other factor. What are the characteristics? And then I press enter, and it's going to resume graphing. And it depends on how fast I am. Okay. Oh, look what happened. I have something coming in. Oh, it's gonna intersect. Where is it going to intersect? Why is it going to intersect? So we can talk about zero product property. We can get a lot of stuff. So I'm going to press enter. All right. I pressed enter again. You can see the pause buttons going, so I'm going to have to unpause. All right, so if I wanted to draw that graph again, I'd have to outsmart what's called the smart grapher. So go into y equals and pretend like I changed something. So type over the x, or type over the 1, or turn it off and on, and then when you press graph, it starts graphing over again. All right, I'm using the enter button to pause and resume, pause and resume. I want to do one more thing. So I've typed over the X. This time when I press graph, I'm going to press the on key. I didn't press it fast enough, but what the on key does is it interrupts it and it will not resume. You actually have to press the graph key to get it doing over again. So tips and tricks for teachers, also on handheld. When I press graph, right now, doesn't do anything, it's already graphed. I'd have to change a window setting or change a function or pretend like I changed a function. All right, so I press graph. All right. On graph, there we go. So that was graphical database 1. So let me go into y equals. I'm kind of finished with those. Oh, wait, I said we would talk about what would happen if. What if I make this be x minus 1? How is it going to affect it graphically? How is it going to affect it algebraically down here when I get into y1 times y2? And numerically, if I look at an output of those, all right, we could still look at a table. I have it on ask, so let me put it back on auto. And again, I know we're moving fast, but we got a lot of things to talk about tonight, and we want to just be sure and have a look at them quickly. All right, graphs, there we go. All right, so for the next portion, I'm going to move very, very quickly. I'll just warn you through some of these other screens. And a couple of reasons. We got a lot of other stuff to get to. You can watch it on the replay, and also the graphical databases that I'm using tonight are part of the documents that you get. So you could put them on your handheld using TI-Connect. You can put them in your SmartView emulator. I am going to go back to here. I am going to go back to my home screen. I'm going to recall graphical database 2. Graphing inequalities, okay? So to do this originally, all I did is put x minus 1 in there, move to the left, press enter, and I can change the color and the line, the style of that. I wanted to shade below, all right? So you just go down here, move left or right till you have what you wanted. Move down to OK. So that's just real quick graphing inequalities. I don't have to have a special app. I just have to graph those. So I graphed 2 inequalities. All right. And we saw what those looked like. Oh, thanks. Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to go back and get graph database 1. Uh, 4 and 5 were 2 parts of a circle. What I wanted to talk about here is recalling. I really want to edit that. I have a circle, I solve for y, with a quadratic, so I solve for y. I can use second recall. What do I want to recall? I want to recall the contents of y4, alpha trace, y4, enter, and then you can edit it to make it be the other part of the circle. All right, skip to the front, insert a negative sign. All right, so that was it. All right, and that would give us those 2 parts. All right, so then somebody said, what was Y6? Yes, I'm graphing y equals -3 for a restricted domain. I only want those x values that are greater than or equal to 1. So I'm dividing by that expression, that inequality. As it goes from left to right in the window settings, it tests it. If the denominator is true, it will have a value of 0. If it's positive, it'll have a value of 1. So that's how I can get a restricted domain there. All right. Okay. Or looking at it piecewise, you could put pieces of functions in there. All right. Inequalities there. In this one, I had a quadratic. I wanted to show you the draw menu. Second, draw. Number 8 says inverse. What do you want to see the inverse of? I want to see the inverse of that thing that I have in Y1. So draw inverse of that which is in Y1. And it will draw the inverse for you. Okay? Then you could solve for the inverse and put it in, put both parts in here and get that. Up here, you might have noticed, and it was real quick, so maybe you didn't get a chance to see it because Ruth went so fast. They were both in blue. That's the default first one for blue for graphing. So you can actually control that. You can make it be a different color. All right. Did I press enter? No, I didn't. But you can find it there. It is enter, draw the inverse. Okay, so that's what this one is about. Graph database 4 is if you wanted to explore the unit circle. You can graph the circle and sine and cosine. That graph database will load those in there for you. All right, and the last one has an image file in it and puts it in polar mode for you. If you want to explore those, you have the graph databases, and you can go back, load them on your handheld or your emulator software and have a look at them. All right, so we've had a chance to look at some multiple representations. We've had a chance to do some tips and tricks, and now we're going to explore even more.
Okay, Ruth, thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on one thing that Ruth said about how to break into a graph. These were the graphs that Ruth was showing before. You can also slow down a graph by arrowing to the left and changing the line style. And one of my absolute favorite line styles is this ball line style. And what that does is it has the effect of slowing everything down because it has to draw a ball at the same time. So here is one of the things that Ruth did before. You see that ball going across the screen. It makes things move a little bit more slowly for the students. Okay, I'm going to clear those out, and I'm going to go on to show you some exciting graphing features that you can access through the stat lists, because so much of what we do is going to be based off of some data and so on. Okay, so what I want to show you is I want to show you an activity that I've done. I've done it with algebra students, I've done it with middle school students, and I've also done it at family math night at an elementary school. It's called body benchmarks. And what we do is we measure people's forearms from their elbow to the tip of their middle finger, and we measure their height. And here's some data from family math night. You're going to have this file with the associated files. So I have some really exciting data, and if I brought it into my classroom, my students could manually input this data, and there could be errors associated with it. We could also, as Ruth showed you, you can use the TI Connect to get the List 1 and List 2 linked to students' calculators. But the other thing I've discovered, just like Ruth had a graphical database that bundled together a whole bunch of information for her, I've created a program, and I want to thank Tom Reardon, who's a T-Cubed instructor, and tell you about the new TI Codes initiative that they're using to get kids coding. And so Tom showed me how to do a program that's going to do all of this same information. So this program is going to put the body measurements of 25 people into the list. It's going to clear all the other lists. It gives you a chance to opt out. I'm going to enter a 1 to tell it I want to see the lists. List 1 is going to be forearm length. List 2 is going to be height. The data is entered, and I was also able to zoom stat and show the stat plot. So there's my body benchmarks data. And now what I want to do is I want to analyze this data. And many of you know about the stat calc menu where you can do various regressions. But you might not know, farther down on the stat calc menu, there are 2 features. The manual fit feature is available on the entire TI-84 Plus family, and the quick plot and fit equation feature is available on the 2 color models, the TI-84 Plus C and the TI-84 Plus CE. We're going to look at that in a minute. But right now we're going to do manual fit. And what manual fit is going to ask us to do, it's going to say, where do you want to store the equation? And as Ruth showed you, alpha trace gets you into the equation list. So I'm going to choose Y1, and I arrow down to calculate. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a movable cursor on my screen. And right now I'm controlling this movable cursor with my SmartPad app from my connected handheld. And this is enabling it to move much more quickly than if you just walk up to your interactive whiteboard and try to move it with the arrow keys. This is much more responsive, certainly more responsive than my computer keyboard. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find a first spot, sorry. Let's see where it's going to land. I've hit a whole bunch of buttons. There we go. I'm going to choose this point right here for my first point. And I press enter. And as soon as I start to move over, you can see that it's also in blue. But this style indicator is right above my graph button. So it shows me that if I push the graph button, I can change my color. I'm going to change it to green, so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to move over, and I'm going to try and get a line of best fit. And I'm going to pick this point here on purpose, and I know you're all going to say, but Karen, this is not a line of best fit, it's too low, and I agree with you. But let's just say we started here. When you first get your line of best fit, before you press done, the top of your screen you'll notice you've got 2 different parameters into the y equals mx plus b equation. This parameter that's highlighted is the slope, and I'm pretty happy with my slope. So I'm going to arrow to the right, and my problem here is that my y-intercept is too low. It's 4. So I'm going to try to put in a larger number. I'm going to try 5. And that didn't do enough for me. I'm going to try 7. This is a much better line of best fit. And so I am happy with my line, so I hit the graph button to get this soft key for done. And now that equation is stored in my y equals where I wanted it to be. The next thing I want to show you is I'm first of all going to go up and turn off the plot. I'm going to clear out this y equals, and I'm going to go to zoom, and I like the zoom decimal window. And Ruth showed you this before. If I hit second zoom, second format, I'm going to get the opportunity to set grid lines, which I like my grid lines. Again, the grid lines are available on the C and the CE models. The grid dot is available on the black and white TI-84 Plus models. But if you arrow down to background, right now my background is off. There are several stored images that come with your TI-84 plus C or CE, and it's also very easy to upload your own background image. There's a set of instructions that's going to be in the webinar documents for you. I like this water fountain, so I'm going to press Enter, choose that image, and then I'm going to press Graph, and there you see my water fountain. And I'm very interested in modeling the parabola shape of the water fountain, and I'm going to use that other feature in my Stat Calc menu that I showed you. If you recall, it was all the way at the bottom. Instead of me arrowing all the way down, I'm going to arrow up, Quick Plot, and Fit Equation. And this allows me to drop points on the graph. I'm going to drop my first point here at my x-intercept. I'm going to come around. I'm going to do a few points. As soon as it gets a couple of points, whoops, I went too far. Don't want that point. See if I can undo that. Oh, that point's in the way. I pick a few points. And as soon as I get a few in there, you'll notice that I got a fit equation soft key, and that fit equation is there as soon as there are enough values so that you can fit a model. Okay, so there are a few points there. If you do hit the graph button for fit equation, you'll see that it leads you right to the Stat Calc menu, and of course we could do the Stat Calc menu like we usually do, so you could choose a quadratic equation. But what I want to do now is I actually want to get out of this, and I want to hit second quit to get out of this, and I want to show you that this data has been saved. If I go to Stat, Edit, L1 and L2 is that body benchmarks data from before. L3 and L4, if I go up to L3, I'm going to put in the data from those points that I dropped. And that data is found in Other Lists. Go to Second, Stat, which is the list menu, and number 7, QPX, is my X values from the points that I dropped. And for L4, second list, number 8 is QPY. And if I go to second stat plot and turn on an L3 and L4 plot, you're going to see that graph. Now, I agree I still have that wayward point. I could delete it from my list, but I wanted to show you something else. We can now manually plot this quadratic and fit this quadratic using one of the apps, transformation graphing. Transformation graphing allows us to set parameters and manually affect those parameters while you're looking at the graph screen. When you turn on transformation graphing, you'll notice that you get these play-pause indicators by the y equals, and that is one of the pieces of information that you're in transformation graphing. The other one on your color calculators, it says right up here, transformation graphing app. If you're on the TI-84 Plus, it doesn't say that, but these play-pause indicators will let you know that it's there. So I want to take a look at a quadratic. So I'm going to do A, parentheses, x minus b squared plus c. Transformation graphing allows you to use up to 4 parameters, and they have to be A, B, C, and D. And what we need to do next is we need to do Window and go over to Settings And I'm going to start with A equals 1, B equals 2, and C equals 3 at a step size 1. If I go to my graph, you can see that my green parabola is all the way up on the screen, and down here I can control my parameters. So A, I want to make A a negative value. When the A equal sign is highlighted, I reduce the value by using my my left arrow. So my left arrow is going to reduce A, and now I'm at -1. I do up and down arrows to move between the parameters. B is my H value in vertex form, so I want B to also go down because I need my H value to come over to here. If I arrow down to the C parameter, I want my C value to go up, so I'm going to right arrow to increase my C value. And now I want a little bit more control, so I'm going to go back to Windows Settings. And this time I'm going to ask for a step size of 0.1. And so now I can reduce my C value. Again, reduce is left until I get it where I want it to be. I'm happy with that. I up arrow to get to B or A. I'm actually really happy with B. A, I think I need to make my parabola wider, so I would ask my students, what do I have to do to A to make my parabola wider? I need A to be closer to 0, so that's increasing it from -1. And here I am doing this manual fit. We are starting to run short on time. Let me just quickly go back to y equals. I'm going to just turn off the plot. And I'm going to clear this transformation graphing. And I'm going to make it x raised to the a. I'm just going to turn off the image so it doesn't distract us. Go back to graph. Whoops. Look what I did. I have x raised to a fractional exponent. I didn't want to do that quite yet. I'm going to set a to be 2 and step size to be back to 1. And so now I have a parabola, and now I can cycle through powers and ask students to pay attention to end behavior. I can even go down and talk to students about what happens when I have x to the 1. What happens when I have x to the 0? What happens when I have x to the -1? And all of these activities with transformation graphing have to do with the action consequence reflection cycle. It's really important to not just display technology to students, but to make it impactful so students remember it later. If students perform a mathematical action and observe a mathematical consequence, then we can ask them to reflect on the result and reason about the underlying mathematical concepts. If you ask good questions, the students' learning will be deeper and build their conceptual understanding. Ask them, what will happen if? How do I make something happen? How is the size of the parabola affected by this parameter? What changes? What stays the same? The last thing I want to do before I pass this back to Mike is to show you the Texas Instruments website, education.ti.com. Downloads is where you can find apps, software, and updates. Many people were asking about where can they find a download for the software for SmartView, and that can be found here. You can get a free trial. You can also find your apps. I referenced the TI codes. If you're interested in coding on your calculators, that's here. And of course, the 2016 International Conference is coming up later on this month. Just to show you again what I mean by asking good questions, you're also going to get a file, Exploring Graphs of Lines with Transformation Graphing, and ask students, why are these lines the same? Which graph appears to be the steepest? I've asked Mike to upload these as Word documents so you can make changes for your students. We've rushed through a whole lot of things tonight. I'm going to pass it back to Mike to wrap up.
As Karen was showing us on the website, we can get some software, we can get apps, and remember, if you go in on the education site and you look under professional development, under online learnings, you can get the on-demand webinars. That's the previously recorded ones, not just tonight, but a few weeks back there was one on using TI-SmartView CE. It was a 30-minute webinar for teachers using TI-SmartView CE. So don't forget, you can look at those on-demand webinars, the best of TI-SmartView CE, so that you can get your most out of your instructional software.
Thanks so much, Ruth and Karen. As we begin wrapping things up tonight, if you do have any final questions, and you've had some great ones tonight, please feel free to get those asked. I know they'll do their best to get those answered. As mentioned earlier, tonight we're giving away 2 free registrations to 1 lucky winner for the T-Cubed International Conference in Orlando. And this week's lucky winner is Lauren Martinez. So Lauren, congratulations, and we'll be in touch within the next couple days over email. And we really hope to see everyone else, including Lauren, at the T-Cubed International Conference in just a few weeks. When you leave the webinar, a brief survey will appear in your browser. Your feedback guides us as we plan future online events, and we really do appreciate your feedback. So please feel free to complete the post-webinar survey. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of great conversation generated tonight, and feel free to continue that conversation on any of the major social media outlets. We'd love to hear what you have to say. To receive a certificate of attendance, you can either click the link in the chat window, or if you're watching this on demand, you could just copy that link down and type that into your browser. If you happen to miss the certificate of attendance, you'll automatically get a follow-up email within a few days. Also includes a link for the documents that were used tonight. I know Karen and Ruth have both referenced that a few times. As they went pretty fast, there was a lot of documents that they provide you that should help you clear up some of the things they went through tonight. If you did ask some questions and for one reason or another didn't get an answer to them and you're still looking to get some answers to those questions, please feel free to reach out to us either via phone or email. Thanks so much, Karen, and Ruth. You both did a great job tonight. And again, just based on the feedback we've already received, I'm not the only one that thinks so. So thanks so much for everything. We really appreciate it.
Have a good night, everybody, and we're looking forward to seeing you in sunny Orlando at the end of the month.
Good night, everybody. Take care.
Thanks so much, everyone. We hope to see you back online next week.